precede Joe, but for their involvement with the industry and moving things forward and improving the relationship between the Conservation Authority and the industry. I want to thank the board for putting up with my delegations on occasion. And I really appreciate the questions and so on that came forward. We do have my replacement starts in September. I will be bringing him around. His name is Scott Collier. He works for the Minister of Municipal Affairs currently. He will be leaving the province and coming to join us. He's well known in London and well respected there. So I think he'll be a good addition for LDI and hopefully continue to improve and enhance the relationship between the Conservation Authority, how it forms in the new year and going forward. So it's simply a thank you, and I appreciate Mr. Chair to give me a chance to say that I've really appreciated the open arms I've received here at the Conservation Authority and the work that we have done together over the last 7 years.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wallace. I will say that we may have always agree with a point of view. It has been a very enjoyable, and I appreciate the openness and the candor for your cause. You've served them well, and it's better to work together and try to get to a point of agreement where we can. So thank you, and
might not be the last time you see me, but as LDI chair.
Excellent. So with that, I will call the meeting to order at 9:33 a.m. and I'll start with the reminder that Emily Chandler is serving as our meeting host. So if you have any online connection problems or issues or technology, please contact Emily. I do see Peter now. I know he was having some trouble, so he is there. I know we have Harsh, Jim, and Scotty also joining online, so welcome. Today's meeting is being live streamed on our YouTube channel. For all board members, staff, and guests, please refrain from whispers or side conversations while the meeting is running. They are distracting to those sitting around you and could be picked up by the microphones. When the squares are glowing red, the microphones are muted. They are green, so they are on. Please make sure your phones and devices are either silenced or off. If you're a board member attending online, please have your camera on during the meeting, especially during voting and during closed session when applicable. I believe we do have a couple of regrets. Dean and Jim as well is here right now. Oh, there he is. He's joined us online as well. Welcome, Jim. And Skylar, he was there before. Sorry, Skylar has joined us online. So oh, Mark and Tom are not here. That's correct. Yes. So we still have quorum. That's the most important part. So with that, I will read the territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Upper Thames River watershed is within the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Luapak peoples who have deep, long-standing, and intrinsic relationships to the land, water, plants, and animals of southwestern Ontario. We acknowledge the First Nation communities within the Thames River watershed who are connected to and by the Thames River. These nations include Chippewa, the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nations of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and the Delaware Nation of Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing and diverse Indigenous population. Urban population. We acknowledge and respect local and regional First Nations as original, contemporary, and future caretakers of this watershed, and we are committed to working alongside Indigenous peoples from across the region and Turtle Island to strengthen relationships, honor treaty rights, and improve watershed health. And more to share on that during my chair remarks, an event that I went to. So with that, I will ask if there's any modifications to the agenda. Seeing none, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? None. There are no presentations or administrative, or sorry, we'll get to the minutes. And I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the June 23rd, 2026 minutes, including the closed minutes. You and George? Gusham? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Just for clarification, you were both at that meeting? There are no business arising for the minutes. There's no correspondence. And so I will turn it over to Tracy for 6.1, which is the 2027 draft budget.
Thank you very much, Brian. You're here. For you, yes, we have completed our budget schedule a little bit, so we do have a presentation to give an overview of the report that's included in your agenda packages. Over here, so, again, a little bit unique year that we have, for our 2027 budget. We really want to highlight that, yes, in 2027, it's 80 years of conservation here at the Upper Thames, celebrating our anniversary. Front cover recognizes our past with the original formation meeting in the photo, and then also ongoing projects that we've been working on today. So the next slide, a little bit of an overview of the timeline. Again, this timeline started actually back in. Yep, there we go. Actually started back in May when the board approved our budget concepts. And then the next steps through the budget process are shown here. Right now in our August meeting, the budget being presented to the board in draft form. Then we'll be immediately circulating out to our member municipalities through the end of September. And then at our October meeting, which is early this year because of the election, we'll have a review of our revised draft budget and the approval of the budget and apportionment. We also are required to submit our budget to the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency 30 days prior to the transition date. Right now, the transition date is February 1st. We're aiming to have this in at the end of December, given the holidays. But we're also told that that transition date may be changed through any regulatory amendments. So as you can tell, a little bit different process, because normally we would be bringing back a revised budget in January and considering the budget at the February AGM. So this, like I say, has pushed everything in advance. The election in there as well. We're trying to make sure that this board, as it sits today, is with you of the final budget. Next slide. As in previous years, we have categorized our budget into our mandatory programs, which are those category 1 programs that are required by the province. Mandatory programs to take this into regulation, and where municipalities can be levied without agreement. There are non-mandatory programs where it's municipality is requesting the CA to deliver a program on their behalf. And then of course, category 3 programs, which are other programs and services that we consider advisable implementing our watershed strategy, and where we have agreements in place to from our member municipalities to carry out those services. Next slide. When we went through our budget development process this year, we had some key considerations, as we do each year. Of course, stability in delivering our mandatory programs and services at the current service level. We really haven't expanded services, and that's fairly consistent with what we've seen with the minister's direction. It's consistent with what we've been doing the last few years, although there has been some areas where we have targeted a few years ago, but I would say we're trying to balance that and have stability in future budgets. We've considered our cost of living adjustments to adjust for not only pay step increases, but also to remain competitive, and seeing an adjustment to our pay grid overall. We're seeing inflation costs driving. We've seen those costs increasing since COVID. Even just last year alone, the London Construction Price Index was 9% higher than in 2025. So that is not slowing down. So we've considered that, especially when we're talking about some of our major capital projects, especially around those dam structures. We've also seen experience from contracts that we've had put out in the last few years that have reflected those increases, either through the contracting works trades, but also through. We also have our multi-year contracts, and example of that is through the Canada Water Agency funding that we have to deliver, and those amounts are reflected in this budget. And we're also anticipating that fees freeze to continue. From the province. We typically get a direction in December on that. That's been fairly consistent the last few years, so we've anticipated that again, and also anticipating some reductions in other federal funding sources. We also had to consider the minister's direction and it outlined there that any anticipated impacts from the regional consolidation should not be considered or incorporated into the preparation of budgets for the 2027 calendar year. So we have not included any costs that may be attributed to that forecasting. Instead, we've taken a conservative budget approach, hoping that if there's any meeting required, that those will be best at that time. With our operating budget, we have our category 1 programs. Table 1 and 2 of the budget package really provides that overview and summary of both operating expenses and funding sources, and then operating budget by the 4 different categories of programs. And we've also always looked into alternative funding sources, but currently are projected to reduce a slight deficit of approximately 60,000. Again, this is very early in the year for us to have a lot of those grant programs finalized or even known about. That's usually something that happens later in the year. We haven't considered any deferred amounts either through this budget. So, again, something that happens typically later in the year. We have a slight deficit in category 2 programs. And then in category 3 programs, aside from the campgrounds, we're projecting just over 522,000 in deficit. Again, much of our category 3 programs relies on those grant applications that we put out. We have not yet heard from those or have not even applied in some cases. Our other category 3 campgrounds specifically are projecting over 566,000 in surplus. Again, we're planning a lot of capital improvements in those areas to update our parks and infrastructure within the parks. Slide. Overall, when we're looking at our operating funding sources of all programs and services combined, looking at the municipal levy component, it's just over 8.8 million, where we have over 10.2 million in self-generated revenue. And kind of the remaining 30% or so are all through either contracts, category 2 programs with the municipalities and other federal grants. You can see that the provincial transfer payment under the Conservation Act has not changed. It's still $181,200. There's also the transfer payment under the Clean Water Act. That transfer payment not only is for the Upper Thames, but it is for the Thames and Sydenham region. So it's the 3 CAs within that region that program supports. Next slide, please. When we're looking at those category 1 programs, about 68% of category 1 operating funding is now funded through levy. 20% is offset through our self-generated revenue. And these are all the mandatory program services, highlighting that although we're eligible to levy for all programs, certainly we do our best to offset those costs to our municipalities through self-generation of revenue as well. Next slide, please. Moving on to the capital budget now. There's a work plan in 2027 with total expenditures of over 7.1 million. Most over half of that is specifically for our water and erosion control structures, major maintenance, with 24 capital projects proposed at 16 different structures. And again, almost $1 million there is for West London Dykes alone. 564,000 is for flood forecasting telemetry. So we're updating those systems. It's part of a multi-year plan to upgrade those telemetry stations for monitoring our rainfall amounts and forecasting, and also our hydrometric monitoring equipment goes along with that. We have some fleet vehicles in the mix, as well as IT servers. And then the remaining 2.7 million is for campground infrastructure, buildings, roads, electrical systems, as I mentioned previously. And a big ticket item this year is some of the costs related to the Piddock Access Bridge that we're working with the City of Woodstock to coordinate that project and fund that project. So again, mentioning that 9% increase in building construction price index for non-residential building in the most recent quarter. Kind of changed the statistics for measuring, but that's where we're seeing a large jump in. Next slide, please. course, with benefit-based capital, projects can vary significantly depending on the costs associated by each benefiting municipality and depending on the timing of the projects. We will always apply for alternative funding sources. One of those funding sources is the WECI program. As you heard back in the spring, or I think it was the June report, the WECI program has changed a little bit in the last little while, capping individual projects at $500,000. They've changed some of the eligibility amounts for projects. And of course, with the limited $5 million of funding throughout the province, that has become very competitive amongst CAs. So hence some of the changes to the program to try to spread that funding out further afield. But this year we have not planned and budgeted for those WECI dollars coming in as we have in previous years. We've decided to be a little bit more considerate of those changes, a little bit more cautious in our budgeting approach, and to not include them through the budget process, but would certainly continue to look to offset those costs. Certainly when known, once approval of funding, we'll update the project costs and they'll be reflected in the budget. Next slide, please. We're going into our category 2 operating funding sources with our municipal contracts with our municipalities. That's almost 1.5 million. ESAs, of course, is one of the big programs that we work with the City of London to deliver on that contract, but also through risk management under the Clean Water Act, a number of municipalities within the Thames and Sydenham region. And we're also undertake some water quality monitoring that's required under EA for the City of London. Our category 3 operating funding sources, the big piece of the pie there, as mentioned previously, is the Canada Water Agency, the over $5 million in federal grants and contracts. A lot of those funds are flow-through funds out to farmers and to projects, landowners within our watershed so that work can happen on the ground. We also have, you can see there, 1.7 million in self-generated revenue. Our municipal cost apportioning agreements are what we leverage from our municipalities that are participating. Again, all but 0.2% of our watershed area is covered by a cost apportioning agreement. And this year it's a $30,000 increase for the continuation of that program. But note that every municipal dollar that we receive through those agreements leverages at least $12. It's pretty close to $13 in funds from other sources of revenue.
Just before you go on with that, I want to drive home as much as I can to the board members to tell your member municipalities that, you know, category 1 programs are probably not at risk as much as higher as category 3 programs. So if you see value in this, it's important that you say that they show the value that we do. You know, these are programs that benefit your municipality. Look at the deal that we like that little blue slice there. And I know one's a big one. These all really are leveraged quite well to make our watershed a better place. But you know, these are not mandatory programs. Remember.
Next slide, please. When we talk about our other category 3, our operating funding sources, and almost all through self-generated revenue to our campgrounds and municipal contracts on some of our lands, Woodstock area. The next slide is our cost apportioning agreements. Again, we mentioned that previously, and again, a reminder that they cover those areas such as stewardship and restoration, as we're working towards our strategic plan objectives to model and encourage sustainable, innovative stewardship of the watershed, our sub-watershed planning and monitoring that allows us to partner and protect, promote a healthy environment and resilient communities by rooting our work in science. And then of course that community outreach and education, like you see in the photo there, and that engagement and collaboration with all of our communities, and especially our youth. Really hitting that home that those are the areas, as Brian just mentioned, they're not mandatory. However, they certainly deliver our programs throughout our watershed to improve the Upper Thames. So when we look at the high level overview of levy changes, we always see a lot of flexibility from year to year. But when we're talking about that operating levy, it's about a 5.2% increase. And that's, again, some of those increases can be tied to changes in modified current value assessment. So depending on the municipality you're in, you're going to see some changes from that 5.2%. But overall, with that cost apportioning support, 4.7%. But then when we're looking at the levies required for operations and major repairs of structures, it's a huge negative number there. Again, it's hard to compare year over year when you have projects that significantly change year over year. The West London Dikes, again, was a big ticket item last year. With that removed, that's an impact on all. They're looking at that aggregate average. And then again, when you're looking at all levels of support, that changes things as well. So I always caution about using percentages because every municipality, it reflects differently. If you have special benefiting structures, that will reflect differently if there's projects happening there. It makes it a challenge. So when we communicate that, the next slide, you would have gotten in front of you, and we'll be emailing out the electronic versions for those online, but a budget communications. Again, we circulate that to our member municipalities as a bit of a draft budget overview and a summary of the document as well, which is included there. And then the offer to present to councils and discussion with municipal staff for input. And that includes everything from the operating levy, the benefit-based capital, cost apportioning amounts for each municipality. But those detailed inserts, we're going to have those ready when asked to go out to those councils, because that's something that's in each municipal council presentation, so that there's a better understanding of where those changes come from for each specific municipality. And then the next slide, future budgets. Again, we've been given direction to complete our 2027 budget as normal. And certainly there'll be the amalgamation of into the Western Lake Erie Regional CA, amalgamating the Essex, the Lower Thames, the St. Clair, and ourselves. And we know that representation is going to be shifting from the single tier or shift to the upper tiers from lower tiers, but maintain those single representation. But again, that compresses our budget process for 2027. So that's where there's some questions I don't know the answers to yet, and we're just trying to make sure that we have something approved by this board in advance of the transition and that uncertainty after the time period of the election. Is there any questions?
Yeah. Before I get into questions, I do want to remind the board that obviously we know from our municipal backgrounds that this is not a normal budget process, and staff are doing the best they can to have numbers that are accurate as possible. It's really a status quo budget, but again, certainly not the time frame that we're used to working in to try to get the best. And the other thing I want to highlight is this is not the budget that we would see without the direction from the province. This is a provincially mandated budget, and so there's limitations on what the board can consider this year. It really is a status quo budget. And the other thing I really want to highlight is there is nothing for consolidation in here. So that has not been decided how that's going to be funded. This budget will go to your lower tier municipalities this year to pay. It's not until 2028 that the upper tiers will get that budget. So again, without that, knowing what that is, it's hard. If your members have questions about, is this what the only thing they're going to have to pay? We don't know. Because there is going to be cost of consolidation in that new budget, but it's not in these budgets. That's going to be put together for the new board whenever February 1st or whenever that is. Sandy?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I want to build on that, but I want to get my head around it. Because governance is going to change. And the new boards are going to have these budgets. And so you said that the 2027 levy goes to the existing municipalities?
That's the way it was communicated through the process.
So it's not until 2028 that the new governance matches the new budget. You know, in other words, who pays?
Or That's correct, but the other option is that the new board would levy the new the upper tier municipalities when they're formed, but again, that's after budgets. Again, there's logistics, there's lots of.
Yeah. I'm just
Yeah, that is
wondering
correct.
what's current, recognizing that things can change.
It will.
Right, okay. So what I think might be helpful in this update is repeating the message that we're doing this budget early because of the direction from the province. You can even leave that part out if you want, but this is a change, right? We usually pass the budget in February to give the municipal councils much more time to look at this stuff. That's out of our control. It doesn't say that here. I know it's been said once, but you can't under-communicate a change. The other change I want to reinforce is I applaud staff for being conservative in this. I had forgotten that the WECI change, that it was capped. And so not including it as our usual budget, I think is an important change, but a realistic one. We're being cautious for good reason. And finally, I'm still just shaking my head. There's only $3 million the province has budgeted for transition costs. And that's going to be split 9 ways based on some process that hasn't been decided, based on perhaps some amendments that may be coming. And this is province-wide. I'm fascinated by the timeline. I'm fascinated by what's going on. And I mean, I applaud anybody who wants to be on the next board. And frankly, I've got a lot of, respect for somebody who wants the job of leading this new board or a new organization. And thankfully, we've got a project status list, thanks to your push, Mr. Chair. But I'd be running in the other direction if I was thinking of the task at hand.
It's certainly a daunting task, and we'll get into that more. One thing, just before I go next, I want to commend our staff. Been doing some research into, how others just get information, but also within the region that we're going into. As in the municipal world, there's a variety of how things are presented and the amount of information is presented. And our municipality should be very happy with the amount of detail and explanation that we get through our CA. And I thank all our staff for that. There's a lot of clarity in there, and it's open and transparent as you can get. And so the province may have a point where some things are not open and transparent. I don't think this was the route they need to go to fix that, but we certainly have that here. And everything that you have in here is probably the standard, probably going forward. I don't have to worry about that much, but so I thank you, everybody, for that, because it's a little bit frustrating trying to get some other data from some other areas. Anna?
Thank you, and thanks very much for the presentation. It's a lot to take in, and we're doing it a little differently. And like you said, Mr. President, it's status quo budget. So my first question is around the communication to municipalities. What is the plan and process given all these changes?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you for the question. And again, I point to staff because we're looking at some of the benefit-based apportionments. Those conversations have already been happening with staff and at councils, with more council agenda items coming up in early September. So certainly considering that, but we have been providing updates. I've sent out an update the end of June about the consolidation process, so that there is an awareness of that with highlighting the budget process. Municipalities were also shared the minister's direction. So yeah, getting out and communicating with them now. When we sent out this agenda package, we highlighted the timeline in that the budget was included in the preliminary form in the package that will be circulated and to expect it this week after it's been considered by the board for circulation. So again, trying to get out ahead of that, and then I'll be following up with municipalities afterwards for any questions. But yes, it's certainly a compressed timeline, and it's a status quo budget. London's a little different. We've always been providing updates through their finance department on their multi-year process. But they haven't begun their budget process. And I think that's the case with most of our municipalities. This is very early, but with the election, it makes it challenging, but we are under minister's direction to have things done 30 days prior to that transition date. So that puts us for the end of the year within the Western Lake Erie Regional CA. All of us are finalizing our budgets in late September, early October, and on a call with general managers from across the province yesterday, and almost everyone was on the same time frame as well.
One thing to remember too, from a municipal perspective, that if you have a strong mayor, you are not allowed through regulation that they put out to table a budget before January 1st. So that means there may be some hesitation. Obviously, I think like the staff behind the scenes will be working on budget information for that process, but it does complicate things if about maybe the timing of how those budgets are going to be approved to meet the regulations for strong mayor budgets. So again, those are going to be not that after doing all the delegations around to inform municipalities of the changes. Not that I want to put Tracy as much through that as possible, so I will offer to attend those with her, but this may be the year, if you don't usually, to have a delegation to explain the changes. I know, sorry, Tracy. But again, this is the year that you need the councils need the clarity on this process, because there is a lot of information to share and keep sharing. And it's gonna, again, want councils to be informed about these changes, because there's going to be effects from this.
I concur 100%, and this is my concern, because right now my understanding is the communications are going through the finance with staff, municipal staff, but how do they come to council? And I think that is something I would like to know a little bit more about, and how do we as a council get informed as a municipal council on the changes. So I think there's a lot more work to be done there.
The other thing I'll highlight too is there's a pesky thing called election going on.
Yeah.
There may be some councils. I'm gonna say Zora, SWACs. I don't want my council to change, but there's going to be changes in council where you're going to have new members come on that have no experience, and there's a lot of changes going on. So I think that is it's going to be tricky about when that happens, because we have to have the budget hopefully approved beforehand. But then the election is going to happen, and then you have councils coming on with their own ideas about how they want to see those budgets happen. So it's a lot of moving pieces to try to. But again, we share the burden to communicate, but this is the province's decision. The other thing I would recommend is that we do have a project executive now. Davin has been appointed by the province. He's a provincial employee, as far as I'm concerned. He's been. I would, if member municipalities have questions again on that they also asked Davin for a delegation to come and explain those things that we can't explain. We're made very clear to us that we're the board of directors for UTRCA. The transition committee is for transition, but we are not the new board of directors that will have control over this. And really the only person that's transferring over through that process, besides all our great staff, is Davin, is the project executive to be the GM. So if anybody should be explaining what this process and he needs to get in front of councils to make sure that they know who he is and who that is. And I get it. There's a lot of councils between here and Windsor, but that's the jobs.
Thanks for that. And maybe a quick follow-up then on that transition. And where the province will be sharing that amount of money between all 9 CAs on the transition, but where are the costs reflected right now on the transition? Or will they be born when the new CA, I know we don't know all the questions, but I'm just trying to understand the budgeting part and the responsibility for these costs. Are they not our costs for the transition? Maybe that's,
Well, they're your costs.
okay.
I would count on that, and that's why I would budget for it. But the problem is the province has defined what the goals. We have not seen a playbook. We have not seen the outcome of what they're trying to achieve, what the scope of that transition looks like. And so without defining the problem, this has always been the problem since day one, is what is the problem you're trying to solve? What are the effects of that? Again, I can tell you right now, just from reallocation, there's going to be a shift of $22 million across the province from municipalities to one municipality to the other without any changes.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Tracy, and it's a question I just thought of while doing the presentation. And we've talked many times about the importance of grants as far as a revenue stream. Is staff continuing to apply for grants as they would in a so-called normal year? And have they seen change in the number of grants available from what we have in the past, especially from like private funds and that sort of thing? Or is it that part kind of business as usual?
Oh, great question. Through the chair. Yes, we are applying for grants like we would normally, but the follow-up question, maybe I'm looking to Teresa about some of the grant availability and eligibility. We've always seen great fluctuations year over year, depending on the project and program, what the eligibility requirements are. But yeah, I don't know if there's been any reductions in the.
No, and I would look to TAT too, because their unit is just as heavily involved in looking for money. So it's, I would say absolutely we're pounding, pounding the pavement, looking for any partners in our area where the kinds of things that I would usually apply for, whatever. We have not seen anything really obvious. I think in TAT's unit, they definitely have from some of the federal DFO related money, but we are just having to be much more creative. I mean, we're competing with everybody else just like normal. And so we just have to be really creative, and we really want to show the value of what they're going to get for their contributions. It's a little stickier when we don't know what's going to happen. We will get the same questions the board gets. What's going to happen once you amalgamate? Will this money go somewhere else? Or what does this? And so we do a little bit of, don't worry about it.
Pat, do you want to add anything to that?
Through the chair, Teresa covered it pretty well. We do have some unexpected losses in revenue from DFO, but we have applications out with them again, so hoping to turn that around.
Remember that our staff have done a great job, and probably too great a job over years of getting grant funding to where it really should have been levy funding. And so that's something as we would hopefully go forward as any organization of this one or a consolidated one, that problem has to be addressed, and it's in the budget as well as that. That's a challenge going forward where we haven't put the reserves the way that we needed to, because sometimes that operational funding has been through grant and the great work that they've built up a great capacity here to be able to do it. That's not the same for every organization. There's challenges that creates of being really good at getting those funding if it's available.
And the reason for the second part of the question was, I know 2 or 3 meetings ago, and we had that really good detailed list of where all the grants come from. There was a lot of grants in there for $10, $15, $50,000 that are coming from organizations that are within our watershed. And I just wondered if some of those organizations says, whoa, we're not handing out money if it's not going to be used in our community. So it's interesting to see where that's heading right now. So thanks for the response to a question that I hadn't thought of until just a few minutes ago.
Through the chair, related to what Paul has just raised is, I know I've been encouraging some of the groups that I'm involved in to get funds to the Upper Thames before February 1st. For a couple of reasons. One is those questions. Second being, and this relates to charitable giving, is when will the new organization have a charitable number for people to be able to give donations? That may not be top of mind at the transition committee,
Possible.
or who knows? It does take time. So at least the money is in hand ahead of time. And the programs are still going to continue to function. So I encourage the groups that I'm involved in to get that money to the Upper Thames now rather than multi-year. Because who knows what 2027 or 2028 is going to bring.
And I'll just say this, in our conversations with various ministers and people representing the province, they have made it clear that that is a concern across the province. They know how important money raised within a watershed that this current organization, another one, is to stay within that. And so they have been very clear that's not an intention to change. So again, some people have, like, Essex as a foundation. And so those are the things where I think that there's still gonna be opportunity for that geographic. Because again, right now, some people give money for a specific area, you know, and it's not just used widely throughout. So there's ways to target that. So I want to try to alleviate those concerns as much as possible. Regardless, I'd rather say Upper Thames on the building, but regardless, there's still going to be that great work that happens. And the work that happens here may be able to improve what happens throughout the rest of the watershed that's going to join us. Any further?
Mr. Chair, through you to Tracy, I do have a question. I want to switch gears a little bit and ask regarding the legal costs estimates, I guess. My question is kind of around, is there an opportunity to reduce those by using in-house counsel? And maybe if you could explain why the legal costs are as they are anticipated.
Yes. If I can through the chair, I'm looking to Jenna and Grant as well. With our legal, we are involved in various legal activities with various different specialization in legal. We have Grant as a resource who directs us to others, and in some cases, you know, again with that specialization to deal with either a land lease matter versus a personnel matter versus activities that are going towards the Ontario Land Tribunal. I think the last few years we have seen some additional appeals, and we've seen those costs rising. So we've been cognizant of that and wanting to budget accordingly. I'm looking to Jenna in case you want to add anything else, or Brent, with some of the legal that we've had is involved.
There's a large increase that we've seen in the land lease errors going to the LTB. It's not necessarily through a grants office, but the specialized legal counsel that we've retained, Cohen Highly, the land lease program specifically. That's ever increasing, but hopefully in the next year or two, we'll see those LTB matters come to a close and have a decision on the reasonableness of our park rules and so on.
Further questions?
I can just add, I just wanted to, again, you know, most of you have already recognized the work of our managers that go into each of the program areas that develop the budget. But this year, thanks to Christine and some additional training, she really brought in our coordinators to be more involved in our budgeting process. Having Questica as a tool for everyone to access and see that budget in real time has been fantastic. And see those changes being made. And then, of course, Eleanor, who is always so gracious at putting everything together and pulling those charts and making it easy to read. It's a lot of information, We wanted to expand on a few areas, so a little bit longer than I think Eleanor would have liked in a budget package, but recognizing that we wanted this to be well documented as we're transitioning to the new region. So thanks to everyone for all the input on this. And of course, Christine giving her accounting advice at every step. It's been very much appreciated.
Excellent. So I don't see any more questions. I will ask if there's a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. That's Paul, Anna, and then discussion. Just know that this is a draft that's going out. It's early. Certainly, it will be going out very shortly this week, I guess. And so feel free to let your municipality know that it's coming as they're getting their stuff together. And again, communicate if they want more information, they want that delegation. This is an important year, especially with the transition happening between lower tier and upper tier as well. So staff are there'll be a lot of communication coming from this end. No, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that takes us to 6.2, which is the flood spill areas. And Jenna is available to answer any questions on the report, and I will turn it over to Tracy.
Yeah, before there's any questions, certainly we've seen with the updates to the Dingman floodplain through the EA process, we have so much more detailed information. That two-dimensional modeling really allows us to better understand where these spill areas are. So of course, with more detailed information, we can also get additional engineering output and identify where those low risk areas are. So again, the report provides the AROs the ability to exercise that discretionary decision making in these cases, relying on engineering opinion, relying on the Toronto region's spills policies, and some of the draft spill recommendations that came in with the draft technical guides too. So I think this is an opportunity just to refine and give some discretion when we know now where some of these very low risk areas are.
Cindy, please.
Yeah, I understand where staff is going with this, and overall, it's a good thing, but again, let's had to wait for a month so that we have more specifics how this might be applied. Because I know that there's a little more detail with what guides say the Toronto region in their work in this area. And I see the broad strokes in the report, but I don't see the detailed stuff. If we had that next month, would it make a terrible difference?
Would anybody like to address that?
Yeah, I think I'll start. I think I think we're in this kind of balance with, again, these are intended to be very interim. So again, the effort to pull together more detail when we're relying on detailed policies of the Toronto region already. We're using that expertise. So I just think, again, the whole idea of having these ARO discretionary policies is to streamline and again, relying on engineering advice in considering these limited circumstances with policy direction that's already out there. I think it gives enough information for staff to be able to make those decisions. But maybe Jenna can kind of explain some of the circumstances when items like this have come up. So you better understand the scope. This isn't a widespread use. It's very localized instances.
Yeah, I think as Tracy already mentioned, we're aware of these areas existing within the Digman watershed. There's been extensive modeling that's been undertaken there, both modeling that our staff have undertaken and then modeling that's been undertaken by the city through the consulting engineers. And it's really a combination of both 1D and 2D modeling, which is really what's allowing us to identify spills areas. So traditional, like older modeling techniques would never have identified a spill area, but with the sensitivity of advanced systems and modeling software, we are able to to predict where these spill areas occur and better understand them. So I think particularly in Digman, we are aware of spills areas existing. And as you saw, as you approved in June, we just updated the flood hazard, and generally we just identified everything as flood hazard. But we certainly do recognize that there are some areas within Digman that we would definitely identify as a spills area. And it's picked up within the flood hazard as a result of that. So I think, yeah, on an interim basis, until we get more direction from the province, I think our intention is to ultimately map these areas separately from a traditional floodplain, so that our mapping would identify what a spill area is, and we would have separate policies. And I think with more direction and guidance from the province, that's where we'll get to. But just sort of as an interim, recognizing that we have very prohibitive floodplain management policies currently, but we do have the information and technology that exists to identify some of these areas, and knowing some of the pressures for development in those areas. Should we apply some discretion where we know these exist? Obviously, it would go through our engineering team to really understand the risk involved and ensuring that it's managed appropriately. So just maybe not taking a hard prohibitive approach for the specific areas that we've identified. But again, I don't see us applying this very broadly. It would be in very limited circumstances.
Mr. Chair, I'm comfortable then passing this today, but I like I don't know if it's a part B that you permit me to add to this, is that when it's first applied, we get a report from staff. You know,
So if you're willing to make the motion, you can.
yeah, I'd like to make the motion that the first time this new approach is implemented, that staff come back with a report to this board, assuming the board, it's during the time of this board, which may only be 2 more meetings. But, you know, I want to be able to see it in motion, if you will. That's the reason for the part B.
So you're moving the recommendations and with that attitude.
Correct.
Is there a seconder for that? Anna? And then I will just, we do have a motion on the floor, but I'll ask for any more questions for the report just before I ask for discussion. Not seeing, and discussion. Paul?
Yeah, I think this is a worthwhile thing to do. We've got a report further on in the agenda where we gave power to the administrative review officers to deal with some permits where staff were generally favorable of the application, but because of the guidelines, they couldn't recommend it go ahead, or they couldn't hand out the permit, which led to a hearing and a lot of paperwork costs and time. And I think we've seen a benefit in that. So I'm comfortable with extending this power to this new level of regulation that's been put forward here.
I certainly agree with that. I think that commend staff for recognizing now that you have accurate information to be able to say, and there's a workable policy available to say, okay, not everything's an apple. Sometimes something's an orange, and that you have the ability to say it shouldn't be held at the same level of process here. That I feel comfortable, and I certainly support Sandy's amendment there. That you know, we see how this works, just to get our head around it. Again, it's going to be very limited, I think, but there are those times, and it's working with our constituents and our ratepayers that are in the area to do the level of service that we need, and so I recommend that. Yeah, we'll see how hopefully the province will, as they work through, will have specific policies around this, but if not, we have something in place to be able to make sure that we're doing our part. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Excellent. There are no reports in camera. So we will go to reports for information. The first one is the mid-year financial update and revised budget. The report highlights that there is no current expectation that the end of the year results be significantly different from planned operation spending. Certainly Christine is here to answer any questions. It's always hard mid-year because there's a lot of things that have to happen still, and things are always delayed and stuff like that, but there's certainly a lot of good information. I will turn it over to Tracy.
Yes, I guess through the chair. Certainly Christine can answer it as well. Any questions on this report? But highlighting the end of the report where we touch on reserves. Certainly we recognize that much of our reserves that we do have are surpluses from our campground operations and not through municipal levy. Again, I always like to reinforce that. Sometimes there's a perception at our municipalities that, oh, you guys have lots of reserves. Well, again, those reserves that have been collected through levy are very limited. And again, I think it just reinforces kind of our conservative approach that we're taking to budgeting this year as well, with the consolidation. We're going to be looking at, certainly, I would think one of the items for the transition committee is looking at what are adequate reserves for our structures and for future years in our mandatory programs and services. So just highlighting those are some of the things on the top of mind as well. We're looking at our financial update.
I will highlight again, when we had that status quo budget, this is not the budget that would probably move forward. And this is one of the reasons it would not have been brought forward, because this board has been trying to get to a better sustainable financial place with reserves and that thing. So I would highly expected that we would have saw a different number for that item. But any questions for Christine? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? You and Sandy? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. That takes us to 8.2, which is the Western Lake Erie Regional Conservation Authority, better known as the UTRCA update. Better or worse, I don't know. Certainly since the publishing report, there has been a doodle poll that was sent out by the new project executive to set up a meeting on September 14th, trying to do that in person, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. So turn it over to Tracy.
Yes, again, with some of the discussions I've had since the writing of the report, I've noted that I've had a couple of calls with Davin. I've had another call with Davin as well, who's the project executive for the UTRCA West, better, but it's still a name that doesn't roll off the tongue yet. But I have lined up a meeting for Gavin to come down on Thursday. I'll spend most of the day here, starting with a bit of a meeting for our managers and coordinators, stopping into our Turtle Lab for a bit of a tour, joining one of the groups who will be participating there. And then some areas right around the watershed, close to the office here, just to get a bit of a flavor, lay of the land, I should say. And much like some of you who attended our members orientation, doing a little bit of tour of the campground, some of the development in and around this location, out to the demonstration farm, and seeing some of the structures in the park. So again, high level, just to get a bit of a flavor. He does live in the watershed, living in the town of St. Mary's, so he is more familiar with the northern end of our watershed up there. So he's excited to come spend the day to learn a little bit more about what we do and how we do it. And certainly emphasize that this is the first of many visits over the coming months. So one other thing that's come up through conversations, again, about board representation after the election. We do have some limitations that I would raise, because in the current Conservation Authorities Act, there is still the requirement for 70% of each municipal position to be an elected official. There are proposed legislative amendments to occur this fall. It's unlikely that those legislative amendments will occur before the election or before municipalities may need to reappoint members not coming back. We are looking for some continuity on our boards. So there is also under the Act a request for an exemption to the minister to allow for non-elected officials to be on our boards. This is an opportunity that it would be, I know I would be very happy with. If there are some of you that are not running, or some who do not succeed in the election, to continue on this board by asking for an exemption to that rule. OPCA and the MECP have stated that they would be very quick in turning around those exception letters within 2 to 3 days. So that is something to at least have some board continuance and continuity until the new board is created. So, and I'd raise that because there's been additional information just again later last week that this information has come to light. And I'll continue to share these updates. With us not having a July meeting, but it'd be better for discussion, kind of grouping the correspondence that we've received and everything all in one report. And I'll forward it out via email, but we'll be updating our board agenda packages, so everything's on the record as well.
The only thing I will highlight on that is that you need to remember that councils appoint members to this board. And what OPCA may not be realizing is that if you have a new council or someone is serving on this board and they're replaced by a different council, that council may not agree to have that person serve. I hope they would for continuity of the board, but that's a concern that is certainly real, that this board and OPCA, as far as I'm concerned, do not have the ability at this point to say that Paul, I'll give Paul an example because he's not running. George must return, and their councils must let them do that. So again, all this stuff needs to be sorted out rather quickly. More as we get the transition team meetings with that, those items we brought up, and certainly I'm sure we're not the only ones communicating that with OPCA and the problems with the wording of legislation, because it does say elected. And so, you know, technically you serve to the 15th. So it's one of those ones, but afterwards we have that time period where it could be even current members, they need to be exemptions for that. So hopefully that will take place and councils will cooperate, even if it was a contentious election. It's one of those things where people will continue to be able to serve on the board. Sandy?
Yeah, my ideal world, since we're only meeting until November 6th, it'd be nice that there wasn't anything that's going to come up before February 1st, 2027. However, there needs to be a board in place in the interim anyway, right? Yeah, so.
It'd be work for the board to do up until February as we.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So where I'm going with this is when your councils meet, your new councils meet, I think it's very important to have that message that continuity would be really helpful for that period until February 1st. And whoever you're going to appoint new board, that's a separate vote, a separate decision. So, I mean, whether I'm here or not after the municipal election is irrelevant, but I mean, or Paul or George, I mean, but for the councils, the new councils to understand what what their options are, let's put it that way. You know, that there's two boards to deal with here. One that's short-term, one that's long-term. How they handle that is obviously their decision, but they should know about that going into it. And I don't know if that comes from the clerks or it comes from the mayors or whoever, but let's not lose that piece. The other question I had for you, Mr. Chair, was you talked about a date of September 14th. Is that the initial meeting of the transition committee?
That is the initial meeting. And certainly, again, when we talk about clarity and information, I'll be honest, there has been none.
So no agenda,
There's
no playbook?
There is no terms of reference for the transition committee at this point. So I can't tell you, again, there's been clarity that things out, that there was that list that's provided in here that says this is the board's job, this is the transition committee's job. But again, what the role of the actual transition committee and how that will be, you know, it looks like in the agenda and what the kind of packages look like has not been communicated. And it's concerning. There's a lot of work to do, or there should be a lot of work to do within, you know, a time frame where busy. Not only are we getting into an election season, we're also getting into you know, budget seasons for municipalities. It's a busy time of year for our municipal staff and different, even CA organizations with applying for things. So there's a lot to figure out there, but there hasn't been. And to be honest, I think the biggest thing for me is the governance piece going forward about what that looks like. You can't operate a new organization without. That's really what's changing, like this governance structure. So that'll be something that I certainly will be pushing for at the table about. Because again, that affects our municipal partners as well about. There's going to be regulations to be brought out that were communicated about how the upper tier municipalities can that who and how they can appoint people. That's a big question. Again, what you brought up before about all those items that are we kind of take for granted with an organization been around for 80 years. All those CRA stuff and all that stuff. You start a new organization. There's a lot of paperwork that has to happen. So we will see. But right now we're hoping to get. Hopefully we get an info dump on September 14th or before, like hopefully before that, so we can digest it. But it's not just sit around and have a handshake and introduce ourselves. That'd be my goal.
If I can, through the chair, just to add from my conversations with our project executive, again, I reinforce that we need some time in advance of this September 14th meeting to review any materials. The playbook, although the project executives have seen a first phase of it, I don't know, version of it, there was some amendments that were needed to better provide consistent language, plain language. I guess it was written very businessese, given the transition committees are made up of general managers, CAOs like myself, but then our board representatives from all different backgrounds. We might not always be speaking in the same Ernst & Young language. So there was intended to be a bit of a glossary of terms to be provided with that, and some updates based on feedback from the project executives when they reviewed it a couple weeks ago. So waiting on that, but was told that, they did not review the full playbook, and it's been separated out into stages. And that first phase is really focusing on getting a business number, HST numbers, payroll systems, CRA registration, which is in and of itself a significant hurdle and challenge, but then also kind of having bylaws and governance for our boards. So many of those things are needed before even to apply for a CRA number. So that's kind of the first phase of the transition, with other playbooks to focus on latter stages and phases. So again, really anxious to get my hands on that playbook to see what that entails and what work we have for the initial steps of the transition.
Because remember, some of those things you would need board approval on. You need governance approval and those things in place to be able to apply for some of those. Yeah. Paul.
That's going back to, we were talking about continuity of this board. And since you pointed your finger at me, I respond. And I have already told our current council that if I'm able to, and if it's the willingness of the new council coming in, that I would be willing to stay on this board until the transition is completed, because Zora will have we will have 4 new rookie counselors, and none of them have any idea what's happened here over the years. I thought, and what I said to our council was, it makes no sense if there's only 1 or 2 meetings to appoint a brand new person to represent Zora. So the unknown is, am I eligible to be on this board after the election? And does the new council willing to reappoint me or just leave me there? And I told them I plan on attending the rest of the board meetings until the board no longer exists. If I get paid for my mileage, that would be bonus. So rather sit here than over there. The other thing I'd like to add is I want to thank Tracy and staff for all the information that they sent out that was on the Zora agenda a couple of weeks ago. with a whole bunch of information about this, what's happening here, because I try to keep up. Inform our board or our council and our electorate of the changes verbally, but it was very helpful to have that well put together package that was on our agenda, so thank you for that.
Excellent. Any further questions? Well, then I'll look for a mover and a second to receive for information. George and Jean. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that takes us down to 8.3 with Environmental Registry of Ontario posting for the governance regulations for region conservation authorities. And this note says, I expect you will have lots to say, and I do. Tracy knows that I've been fighting her on this one because I've done a lot of math. So first of all, it took them 3 times to get the population number correct. There was a problem with it, and it was a single tier. With it, they include the single tier population twice within once for itself, but then also within the county populations. And then the second go around, they picked some of them, not others, and then it was, so I don't know where they got the numbers from. It's all based off numbers. My issue with this, and I will be honest, I put a separate, not from the board or anything like that, my own submission to the ERO is there's two major problems with this. Is one is population is a horrible model to do this by because they're just they're at least some underrepresented and overrepresented. The biggest issue there is that you have let's take London. London's a great example. So London is going to end up underrepresented in the Western Lake Erie, and they're going to be paying over in Eastern Lake Erie, and that's due to when they did the population, they just took the whole population. They said this much percentage is in geographically in this area, and they used the same percentage of population. The problem with London is that there's not 65,000 living in where it's Kettle Creek right now. It's farmland. But that big reduced population meant to one less board member on UTRCA because you had to get to 3 decimal points to get Huron County in there because it has just no population. So it meant that it didn't round up to 30% or over, so they didn't get their board members. The other major problem with this, and that you'll see on the board representation, the size of the board, is that they went and they said every member will be entitled to a member on the board. So if you're in the watershed, you get a member. The problem with that is that it should have said representation, like we do here. Multiple people represent multiple municipalities, and you get representation on the board because and we have the most extreme example within the Western Lake Erie. Huron County will have 0.0007 of 1% of the MCVA in the watershed. That's 44,600 times less than London. They get 1 member. London gets 3. They'll also end up paying the reallocation about $100 to take the current budgets in this. But so there's some real issues there of clarity and issues where it creates unfairness on the board where members cannot. So I don't think they did a deep dive into this enough. And so I think that when we get down to it, you're going to have conflict between members. Certainly, Essex right now has provided 3 members. They're at the bottom. London's at the top of the range. There's a big difference there. And so it's an important thing to get right, to go to governance about how that's figured out, because it has a lot of cascading effects when you have those border ones like London is in multiple ones, and who's paying what and how that works out and who should have representation. There's a big difference between member. Do you need a member on there or do you need representation on? And that's a big, but they have picked the wording of member and they've shown that in the slides that are included. I think that's going to make it very difficult to change because who's going to want to give up their member, but is it truly an equitable system? I'll turn it over to Tracy for your correct.
Yeah. So again, we've recognized some of the population variances amongst the areas for many years. again, this is an opportunity. We're starting fresh. Why don't we use better information? Part of what Statistics Canada does is they actually break down their population data into dissemination areas, which are smaller chunks of information to understand where population actually resides. We feel that that method would better reflect where populations are within the watershed and in the various watersheds across the province to then better reflect where that representation should be made. Again, I agree with Brian in that, yes, if they're capping that representation amounts, there should be a minimum threshold as well applied to when a member is appointed. Peely Island is always the example that Essex Region brings up. They are a single tier municipality, although it says their population is 230. Year-round residents is much less than that, or less than 30. So those types of things, again, it further complicates things. I know in the past, other CAs have single representatives from very small populations, and they've had to introduce a minimum levy just so that the levy covers the costs of having a board member represent them. And I don't think that's reducing any red tape and being streamlined at all either. So really, we've looked at what that information can be in those dissemination areas to better reflect those populations. The other interesting thing too is looking at Statistics Canada data, the census information gathered. They're planning a release of their population and dwelling information for the 2026 in February 10th of 2027. So depending on that transition date, that might immediately change those population projections, especially in those areas of high growth. London being one of them, that already being at the very top end of the range, that could likely push them into another member. So a 23 representation on the new board. Even in the early information circulated by the province when the amalgamations were first being suggested, their goal for representation was between 15 and 20. Now this is exceeding it. That's the same case in the Eastern Lake Erie region, regional CA as well. So, and a lot of others. So again, wanting to ensure that the governance is reflective of the membership, but how that representation can be shared. And much like our order in council, I think setting up the rules at the beginning will serve everyone well instead of trying to come to an agreement after the fact. And because we all know that would take some time. So this is information that I'm willing to share to our municipalities, but really think that some of this feedback needs to be from municipalities as it's affecting their representation. I've had a conversation with Sandra, the city manager at London. But more than welcome to have further conversations. We're meeting this afternoon as the GMs of Willerton to go over some of this data. So we've kind of dividing and conquering who's going to talk to their area municipalities. And if we have duplication, we choose who the main contact will be and identify those leads. So anyway, sharing this now so that you can all be aware. If there's questions that come about.
Certainly, Dean and I met with Mayor Morgan as well on this to make sure that he was informed of the specifics case of London because it is a border community between two. So it does have some implications that way as well. The other issue I did want to bring up though is that most of it, and certainly ours, is like that we bill on CPA, on MCVA, which is a modified current value assessment. We have this great organization called Impact, who provides yearly updates to our municipalities on which would be a better model to use. And because when you have board representation, it has to be equitable to who pays and how that works. And there's cases where if you switch from a population to an MCVA representation model, that flips. Specifically in Peel and York region, Peel has a much higher population, but York has a much higher assessment, modified assessment. So really there's right now, it would be that Peel would have more representation, but York would get a larger bill, representation on the bill. So again, I think it's important that I can certainly send my submission to every board member so they're fully aware of my thoughts, they're my personal thoughts, but again, I think it needs to be highlighted that if you don't get this fundamental issue right, you're going to be chasing your tail. Again, populations are only updated through the census every 4 years. The 5 years really, yeah. So it takes, that's a large cycle, whereas assessment, even though it hasn't been reassessed, the assessment is cited every year. So it's one of those things where I hope they take the time to get this right and other things right, because otherwise your municipalities could be paying more or less, or have more or less representation on what you should have.
So if I understand it, it's still in the ERO, so it's still a work in chaos, right? Work in progress, all right. But do you need this board to take any action, or you see this as a municipal council issue?
I think it's an effect of, it's going to be,
Who should be?
I think it is a municipal item where the municipalities, our member municipalities, are going to be appointing members for representing their wants. And certainly, like City of London and Oxford, we're not changing. There's a lot of change though, where it is going to the upper tier where they may not have the experience. And certainly there's budget implications to that as well. So again, it's one of those ones where they need to know, and I'm sure not a lot do. Because again, there hasn't been great information coming out. You may look at this and go, okay, great, I'm getting a board member. But are you getting the right amount of board members is the worry. And certainly even the tier system is, again, all my calculations were just using the tier system. Is that the right method? I think this is where municipalities need input. We got to remember the conservation authorities were municipally driven items. The province is changing that to provincially driven, really, especially on governance and everything else and policy. This is the time for municipalities to say what they want.
I didn't just ask, you're not asking this board to approve something to be submitted to the environmental registry.
No, that was
Okay,
just for information.
that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and glad to hear that you've met with the mayor of the City of London and will be meeting with the city manager. I do have a question about your comments around impact. I think those assessments are more, will give us clarification, but they have not been updated since 2016. So how important is it? Do those numbers still, are they regulated still, even though they're not updated? In other words, how valid is the information coming out of impact right now, given the updates have not been done since 2016?
Is accurate compared to this methodology they're using. What needs to be updated is the ratios and who's paying what. But the method, the great thing about every year, staff get the numbers for within this watershed, and so it's really the same as municipalities do. You can get the reassessment in there. It's really the fairest method of saying who has the ability to pay.
I'm glad they're being updated. Thanks.
Further questions?
I agree with everything you said about how this assigning membership based on population makes no sense. Whether it's 230 people or 30 people that get a representative, and then at the top of the chart, it's one member for 120,000 people. That's not representation by population. It's just setting arbitrary numbers and cutoff levels. The other thing I found interesting in the potential board representation was that when this whole amalgamation was announced, the reaction from those of us that represent rural municipalities was that conservation authorities were going to be taken over by the cities. And when I look at the way this is set up, there's actually 7 members from cities, 3 from London, and 1 from Stratford. But the unknown is when you look at those 7 counties, or the counties that are going to have 3 or 2 or 1 representative, is where are those representatives coming from? Are they coming from the rural communities, or are they coming from the big cities or from the smaller cities that are not single tier, and from the larger towns like Ingersoll? So that's another unknown in this whole equation, because this board could end up with, you know, 7 to 10 urban representatives and 12 rural representatives, or it could be virtually no rural representation. And as a representative of a largely rural municipality, that's certainly a concern that rural voice is still going to be there in this organization.
The answer is nobody knows.
No, not
Because the regulators haven't.
That's why it was a
Yeah.
comment, not a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All unknowns.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a mover and a seconder to receive this information? Paul and Jean. Discussion. Again, it's really important that municipalities have their say on this now. And not only just do they agree with the number they have or not, but the methodology. Because once it's locked in, it's going to be very hard to change. And I'll take this time to just let you know, there is going to be financial effect without any change whatsoever through reallocation within the new watershed. There will be winners and losers. As I said, across the province, it's probably about $22 million of shift between burden between municipalities. So again, representation is important when you go forward about who pays what. Further comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And it takes us next to our next ERO posting, which is 260740. Oh, no, that's the same one. Yeah, flip page. 0329, thank you. Reminder that we've been waiting on this since the last time, which is 2002. That's a long time now. Driving in, I saw a billboard that says if your kid was born in 2022, you got to register for school. And I'm thinking, wow, wow, still 1985. No. So it is evidence that staff took a significant amount of time and they've been waiting on this for a long time. So that's very thankful for that and the great comments that come with it, because this is one that we have submitted and it's just for information, but certainly is very important to the operations of this organization going forward and our members and the people that rely on that document has a lot of clarity as well. So there's less room for debate, I will say. I'll turn that over to Tracy.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. I just wanted to highlight clearly by the list of comments provided, you can see it was a lengthy review and involved a number of staff from our planning and reg staff to talk about the policy side of things and the implications and hazard policy and the PBS to regulation staff to its impact on how we implement the regulation to our engineering staff, the modeling work that's been undertaken. And a lengthy opportunity to provide input, really highlighting that this shouldn't be a one and done. This should be something that we're continuously working on and improving, and having a working group with the Ministry of Natural Resources that finalizes the document so that we can understand the rapidly changing framework in which technology has allowed us to better understand hazards. We just talked about it with spills policy, being able to recognize and respond to evolving needs, much like we've given our ARO officers. So certainly that's something that MNR is apparently open to from our call yesterday afternoon with Conservation Ontario and setting up a working group. So we're looking forward to that. I know highlighting some of the bulletins. I think it's our standpoint that we'd rather the document be separated more so that individual bulletins can be released and updated more readily instead of having such a massive document to review and taking quite an undertaking to update, and especially when we want things to be updated more frequently. With that, I would say it's great that we have an opportunity to review and submit comments. I would say there's still lots of work yet to do to be a useful tool for our practitioners, and I look forward to those ongoing collaborations with MNR to get a document finalized.
Any questions? Sandy?
No questions other than to say, thank you, staff, for the deep dive that you did into this, a large amount of work was done. And really, people who've worked on this, who worked with the old regime for so long, really took the time to make what I hope comes out to be a better document. So thank you on behalf of myself and the rest of the board.
More questions or comments? I'll move to seconder for information. Andy? You? Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move down to 8.5, hydro plant update. And this is response to a report was requested by the board after the initial work was complete. And I will turn it over to Tracy for.
Sure. As you can read from the report, there's been some additional work completed and then more questions arise. We haven't fully undertaken a cost benefit analysis to have a full understanding of total costs until we have some better information required to return the hydro plant to its operation and meet our current connection requirements. But also see the hydro plant as something that, we're looking at our strategic plan, modeling behaviors, that it is a green, clean energy that's produced. So sometimes it means putting in some financial improvements now, knowing that those costs, not only financially, are going to take some time, but also represent us well. So we've do have some additional information on the pricing that typically we've thought in the past and through conversations with London Hydro. Again, it's always hard to pin down because often we see hydro production as a savings in our bill. But even with selling it back to the grid, it ranges from 2 cents to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And then on average, the usage at Fanshawe the usage the hydro plant is able to generate is over 2,860,000. So we could see any revenues generating between 56,000 to 143,000 annually. Again, based on water flow rates, of course, that's always a fluctuation as well. So there's also some opportunity to bank, get credit for the hydro used to offset those peak times when we're using hydro. But we really have to better understand what the next steps are to complete the upgrades to know the next steps. So I'll leave it at that. I know there's lots of technical information in this report that goes through the next steps, but I'll have it answer questions.
Sandy, please.
The take is it's the new board that be wrestling with this. We're not going to have a cost benefit before this board disappears.
Do you want
I
to?
may respond to that through the chair. It's important that we keep things moving along so that we get more information on it, so that we can answer those questions.
And it's the next board that's going to get it.
Ultimately, yeah, it's going to be, this is not going to be solved tomorrow. Yeah, getting a consultant engaged with it is going to take some time. Working with London Hydro, it's going to take some time. All those things add up to, yeah, there's a few significant hurdles we have to overcome.
I get it. I mean, there's part of me that's tempted to say, hey, at some cost, give it up. What staff are telling me, there's still information needed to make that decision, but it's not going to be this board's decision. Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
I think it was this board, and I believe it was Scott that brought forward the motion to look into this. And I think in the long term, I think if even as a break-even scenario, it fits what our branding is and what we're trying to achieve. But I believe we're paying more than 2 to 5 cents right now per kilowatt hour in the park. So there'd be significant cost benefits to that as well. So in the long run, that's a big generator, a lot of potential. Yeah, I think it's worth going down the road till we get to that point where we know there's a cost benefit analysis. Whoever looks at that makes that call.
Just to clarify too, when we're talking about the hydro plant, that is a other category 3 program. It's not not a mandatory program, although it's associated with the dam. The province in their technical direction back when we were separating out categories of program identified hydro production as well as logging activities. So.
Which traditionally would have helped offset costs
Right.
associated with category one now, but thoughts have spoken. Paul?
Yeah, a word of caution here based on Zora's experience. We the two factors here, and one is the cost of getting the generator and everything up, so it's working properly, and that appears that that's going to be well over $100,000. The other is and you referred to it, is the how the contract with London Hydro works, because a few years ago in Zora, we built a brand new public works building. We covered it with solar panels, thinking that our hydro costs would be only the cost of paying back solar panels. But then after the first year, we found out what the charges were for delivery and peak usage from Ontario Hydro was that it wasn't nearly as good as we thought it was going to be. It was like less than half of what the deal was going to be. So it's one thing to fix the thing. It's the other thing to make sure that the contract makes sense too. And as it says, that's one decision we're not going to have to worry about because it's too far down the road.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, moving a second to receive this information. George and Skylar. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And 8.6, administrative review officers, quarterly report.
Those are reports.
Moved by Sam.
Additional application.
Seconded by Anna. Any questions or comments? None, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Second quarter update for implementation of service delivery. Questions or comments? Mover. You. Signed by Jim. Discussion. All those in favor? Approved. And section 28. Seconder for that. Anna and George. Discussion. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, project status update. Information there. And I know that Tracy does have a comment on that.
Well, I'm just gonna say through the chair that, as noted previously, when we have updates on the progress of the transition committee, for the UTRCA, will be included in monthly reports as well.
Moving to seconder for that. Give the information, Paul and Harsh. Discussion. Andy?
Good question for Tracy. I assume the project executive has seen this list already? If not, he should.
Yep, that's, I'm just gonna
And
take
the
you through
transition committee.
our agenda package, when we meet on, Thursday. I would imagine he's probably been glancing at past agenda packages already.
I would hope so.
As Brian has stated, we have everything posted very easily to find on our governance page on our website.
Very good model for others to follow. Sorry, yes, all those, any other questions and all those in favor? That's a great question. Sorry, in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thames River Current, August edition. Moving a second to receive that as information. Skylar and George. Discussion. Lots of great stuff in there. Was able to, here's the key to this one. If you ever want media to show up, say it's secret. I can't believe there wasn't a helicopter flying. A lot of people in a very nice neighborhood that I can't say where that was, that were very thinking that someone died. But it was a great opportunity and a great media coverage, and it's a fantastic thing that happened. Where first ever time in Canada that freshwater mussel been redone. It has taken 16 years to get there. So it's a lot like the turtle program. It takes a long time. But that's a great sign that our watersheds get great partnership there. But yeah, you can use that one in the future to say top secret. Did I ask for mover and seconder? No. Mover and a seconder. And Sandy, further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. There are no finance and audit committee. There is a hearing committee briefly after this just to approve the minutes. Any notices of motion next meeting? Not seeing anything. Chair's comments. Just before we play this, I had the opportunity of Ingersoll was able to host their first sunrise ceremony, and certainly UTRCA has done one at Piddock as well. But certainly Mayor Lou Smoke had asked that we spread the message, and I thought what a better place with what we deal with than with planning of the water song. And so this is Mary Lou Smoke. I'm sure we're all familiar with her. She's a great advocate. She gives her time very well. And if you ever have an opportunity to go to a sunrise ceremony, please do. It's very moving. As we remember and we speak to the acknowledgement of our growing urban Indigenous population, one thing that I took away from that was hearing residents of Ingersoll who are Indigenous being very thankful they didn't have to travel outside their community to take part in part of their culture. So it's sometimes forget that things we take for granted.
Where I come from, when we greet one another, we say bonjour. So bonjour.
Bonjour.
Asanyenes Koyen Dejnakas, Makwadodem, Batchwanabe Dunjaba. My spirit name is Shooting Star Woman. I'm Bear Clan, and I originally come from Batchwanabe, Ontario, which is on beautiful Lake Superior. But I've been living in the city of London here with my husband Dan.
Asanyenes and Dishnakas, Kildare, Dodam, Six Nations, Grand River, Dinjaba. My spirit name is Asanyenes. It's in the Seneca language. It means star in flight. I like that we loosely translate it to shooting star.
So right now we're going to share this song called The Water Song, and it's a very simple song. People love this song because I loved it the first time I heard it. And I was able to learn it right away because I just have a way with songs. I've been singing since before I probably could talk, but I've been singing my whole life. And if you can't remember the song from what we're singing right now, you can go to YouTube and cue in my name, Mary Lou Smoke, and you'll see me singing that song at Harborfront, the water song. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey. Pretty simple, eh? Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya. Wichita, do ya, do ya, hey. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey ya. Hey ya, Chinaya, hey ya, hey. Hey ya, Tenaya, hey, 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 Tenaya, hey, hey. Now we're gonna sing the last verse like our life depends upon water. Oh, Wichita, do ya, do ya, do ya, Wichita, do ya, hey. Wichita, do ya, Wichita, do ya, hey. Hey, Tenaya, hey, 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 Tenaya, hey, hey. Hey, Tenaya, hey, 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 Tenaya, hey, hey. Whoa, Matakiwasan. All right. Matakiwasan means all my relations in the Lakota language. I discovered throughout my lifetime that I am 5 parts Ojibwe, 1 part Lakota, 1 part Mi'kmaq, and 1 part French. So I have all those nations inside me, and so it's giving me opportunities to learn so much more about the ways of our people in different areas. So I'm still learning, and I'm gonna, continue learning for the next 20 or 30 years.
Unfortunately, Dan passed away since that video, but Mary Lou is still very active, and she was kind enough to grace the Ingersoll and perform that ceremony. And again, I think it's very fitting that the story about that song is that water affects us all, and we know that here. So yeah, if you get an opportunity, please take the opportunity to do that. And they have a open ceremony that they performed that's on our lands here at Fan Shop that they run out. So that's available as well. Are there any members' comments? Or managers' comments?
Thank you through the chair. Just a few reminders. We've got lots going on this week, it seems, trying to get a number of things done before the summer wraps up. But we have a few public meetings related to our regulated areas updates. So tonight, staff will be out at the Kamoka Community Center. And notices went out to almost 300 landowners within that study area. So hoping for a good turnout there to learn more about our regulated areas through Delaware. On Thursday night, we're focusing on the South Thames and be at the Flight Exec Center in Dorchester. So I think over 1,000 notices went out in that study area. So we've got information on our Engage website and have been using social media then to remind everyone of those events. Tomorrow morning, we're hosting a Partners Day with Turtle Lab Tour. Been a number of Turtle Lab tours. Tonight is Nature London as well. So that's been ongoing. Been able to have some students in last week from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. That was one of them to learn more about the program in the policy section and their species at risk section. So Scott's been gracious with his time. If you ever get an opportunity to listen to Scott, you have, I'm sure, but I always come away being so engaged and so enthusiastic for the work he's been doing that it's great to see, and it doesn't hurt to see some baby turtles and other endangered species. And then Thursday, my day with Davin, our project executive. So that will be here and around. And then that'll round out the week. But then looking ahead a little bit further, I know Michelle sent this out initially, but just a reminder that Laternal, the conference that is near and dear to the conservation authorities, will be happening back at the Nottawasaga Inn and Conference Center, November 3rd and 4th. Back to its roots from where it began, really focusing on the 80th anniversary of conservation authorities. So if you're registering, please let Michelle know and she can assist with those details. So with that, reminder that our next meeting is October 6th. So not having that meeting at the end of September so that we can finalize our budget, have a little bit more time with that, and yeah. And knowing that the election is around the way, that you are running, happy campaigning.
Very much. Questions on that? Move for adjournment. Yeah, and you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you.